A pleasant day to you, Ma'am Nicey and our classmates. We are the Group 4 and we will be presenting our report about medical ethics. As medical technology students, our learnings are not only limited to just extracting blood and examining samples, rather we learn a lot more than what we had bargained for. So, for today, let me introduce my group mates as they help us understand what medical ethics is. We have, by appearance, yours truly, MARLIA NABOR, Miss VEAH Ortega, Mr. DEOMAR PARADO, Miss KHAREN POLINA, Miss REIZIL DAYRIT, Miss ANDREIANNA SOLIJON, Miss KATRINA MONDRAGON, Miss TRICIA BARBA, Miss PATRICIA and lastly, Miss ELNA BUSLON. Now, let us all come together and listen to Miss Ortega as she introduces us to medical ethics.
Good day everyone, I am VEAH Ortega and I will discuss to you the brief introduction about medical ethics. First of all, ethics is a study about morality, careful and systemic reflection on an analysis of moral decision and behavior. Ethics has a lot of branches, and our group will discuss the branch of medical ethics. Medical ethics deals with moral issues in medical practice. It focuses primarily on issues arising out of the practice in the field of medicine. It is concerned with the obligation of the doctors and the hospital to the patient along with the other health professionals and society. The application of medical ethics is often problematic, since physicians, patients, their family members, and other healthcare personnel may disagree about what is the right way to act in a situation.
Good day to everyone who has joined this virtual meeting. My name is DEOMAR Joseph A. PARADO, and with my colleagues, we will be discussing the following medical ethics principles. I'll start with the first of the 5 foundations of medical ethics, which is autonomy. So, first off, what is autonomy? Autonomy is the act in which the patient must have freedom of information and action upon decision-making with regards to medical care procedures. Satisfying autonomy requires seeking consent and agreement with the patient before any medical procedure is executed. This involves that they must be fully informed of the benefits and risk when the medical procedure was pursued, as well as its percentage of success. Moreover, the medical professional has to tell the truth and to be faithful to one's commitment to be efficient and not inefficient. So, how important is autonomy in medical ethics? Autonomy is important because it primarily satisfies where the patient must be actively involved in any medical diagnosis or treatment instead of just relying upon the doctor's decisions. Karen, you may now take the lead.
Next, we have the principle of beneficence. Beneficence means that all medical practitioners have a moral duty to promote the course of action that they believe is in the best interest of the patient. Often, it is simplified to mean that practitioners must do good for their patients. In other terms, it is acting in a way that helps the patients or those in need of medical assistance. However, it could be problematic in some ways. It's better to think of beneficence as the process of ranking the available options for the patients from best to worst. Take into consideration the following aspects. Will the option resolve the patient's medical problem? Is it proportionate to the scale of the medical problem? Is the option compatible with the patient's individual circumstances? Is the option and the outcomes in line with the patient's expectations of treatment? We can notice that several considerations are concerned with the patient's expectations, which is also known as holistic or patient-centric care. It is important to bear the patient's expectations in mind when ranking treatments because when we refer to doing good, we are not simply referring to what is medically good for the patient, but also what is acceptable to the human being we are treating. Therefore, beneficence is really important because it ensures that healthcare professionals consider individual circumstances and remember that what is good for one patient may not necessarily be great for another. Beneficence asks us to promote a course of action, but in practice, we also need to promote certain courses of action if there are better options available.
Another pillar and principles of medical ethics is confidentiality. Loyalty and trust are the foundations of confidentiality. Keep all personal, medical, and treatment information secret. It is permissible to share information for the benefit of the patient and when it is morally and legally obligatory. Patient's privacy must be protected throughout all phases of therapy. The patient has the right to be free from unjustified public exposure except in the following circumstances. First, it is when his mental or physical condition is in dispute and the appropriate court, and its discretion orders him to submit to a physical or mental examination by a physician. Second is when public health and safety requires it. Next is when the patient waives this right in writing. The patient has the right to request that all information, correspondence, and documents relating to his treatment be kept private. Any health care provider or practitioner involved in a patient's treatment, as well as all those who have legitimate access to the patient's record, are not authorized to disclose any information to a third party who is uninterested in the patient's care and welfare without his consent, except when such disclosure will benefit public health and safety. Next is when it is the interest of justice and on the order of a competent court. Next is when the patient waives the confidential nature of such information in writing. And lastly, when it is required for continued medical treatment or advancement of medical science, subject to a patient de-identification and shared medical confidentiality for those who have access to the information. Informing the patient's spouse or family to the first degree about the patient's medical condition may be permitted, provided, however, that the patient of legal age has the right to select whom to notify. If the patient is under the age of 18 or is mentally handicapped, this information must be supplied to his parent, legal guardian, or next of kin. Thank you.
Non-maleficence is the obligation of a physician not to harm the patient. This simply stated principle supports several moral rules. Do not kill, do not cause pain or suffering, do not incapacitate, do not cause offense, and do not deprive others of the goods of life. The practical application of non-maleficence is for the physician to weigh the benefits against the burdens of all interventions and treatments, to prevent those that are inappropriately burdensome, and to choose the best course of action for the patient. This is particularly important in pertinent and difficult end-of-life care decisions on withholding and withdrawing life-sustaining treatment, medically administered nutrition and hydration, and in pain and other symptom control. The principle of non-maleficence requires that every medical action be weighed against all benefits, risks, and consequences, occasionally deeming no treatment to be the best treatment.
On to the fifth principle of medical ethics. Justice in the context of medical ethics is the notion of determining whether something is ethical or not. Hence, we must consider if it is in accordance with the law, the right of the patient, and whether it is fair and balanced. It also implies that we must ensure that no one is unfairly disadvantaged in terms of access to healthcare. On to the topic of fair treatment and access to healthcare, everyone is entitled to the right to the highest attainable level of health, which entails a clear set of legal obligations in notions to ensure that all people can enjoy good health without discrimination. Furthermore, the right to health is one of a set of internationally recognized human rights standards that are inextricably linked to the other rights. As with other rights, the right to health encompasses both freedoms and obligations, such as the right to govern one's health and body. So, for example, sexual and reproductive rights, as well as the right to be free from interference, are examples of freedoms, for example, free from torture and non-consensual medical treatment and experimentations. Entitlements include the right to a healthcare system that ensures that everyone has an equal opportunity to achieve the best possible health.
Moving on to oath declaration. Oath declaration basically refers to what medical professionals prepare and perform before officially starting their job as a medical professional. It is where they state a solemn promise in the accordance with loyalty and truth to perform the job, such as to provide the finest possible care for the sick, to keep the confidentialities of the facility or the patient's information, to perform its duties professionally, providing the appropriate treatment and acknowledging the right of each patient, and etc. Other than that, declaring an oath enables the person to recognize his or her responsibilities and duties along with the objectives of what has been promised.
Now, moving forward for the takeaways. It is beneficial that one must know, interpret, and apply for the respect of onset foundation of ethics and all these four moral principles, such as autonomy, having the ability of the patient and physician to be mindful of their decisions before proceeding to action. Second, beneficence, having the consideration of the best treatment option available for the patient. Third, confidentiality, being able to integrate loyalty and trust to one another and keep files as private. And lastly, non-maleficence, obligation not to physically, mentally, and emotionally harm the health of the patient. Moreover, have justice to withstand patients' freedom and their entitlements as an individual to the community. And lastly, oath declarations, wherein truthfully doing all the responsibilities and duties in a rightful manner, especially in the setting of the medical field, for henceforth, the professionals would have self-awareness in healthcare dilemmas, make good judgments and decisions based on their beliefs and values that guides through the patient's treatment while keeping within the laws that govern them.
Thank you, Pat. Overall, our group discussed what is medical ethics and the principle of medical ethics. Medical ethics is a collection of moral principles, beliefs, and values that guide us in making medical care decisions. It has five principles, namely autonomy, beneficence, confidentiality, non-maleficence, and justice. Autonomy refers to the patient's ability to make final decisions about their own care. Autonomy also implies that a medical practitioner cannot force therapy on a person for any reason, unless that individual is considered incapable of making autonomous decisions. Beneficence implies that all medical practitioners have a moral obligation to encourage the course of action that they feel is the best for the patient. Confidentiality is the other pillar of principle and medical ethics. It requires healthcare practitioners to keep a patient's personal health information private unless the patient gives approval to divulge the information. Next is non-maleficence, or to do no harm to the patient. And lastly is justice. In the context of medical ethics, justice is the notion that while determining whether something is ethical or not, we must consider if it is compatible with the law, the patient's rights, and if it is fair and balanced. That will be all. Thank you.